Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Stronger Weekly, brought to you by Purist Nutrition. I'm your host, Jesse Karajat. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for trying us out. If you've been here before, welcome back. Happy June, happy summer, happy all the things. Hoping that your summer is off to an amazing start. We've got a great show for you this week, an awesome topic that I'm going to reveal in a second. Hopefully we don't disappoint. But before we get into it, if this show has ever helped you, or even if you're checking in for the first time, do us a favor, just hit that follow button if you could, wherever you're listening. Leave a 5-star review. And most importantly, share this episode with one person who needs it. That's how this show grows, just word of mouth from awesome people like you. So thanks for giving that a thought. Now, for today's episode, it's going to challenge you a little bit. We're tackling a question that I don't think people ask themselves enough. And when they do, I don't know that they answer it honestly, at least in an informed way. And that question is, are you actually training hard enough? Look, so many of us invest time every single week, week over week, month over month on our fitness goals. That investment could be 2 hours a week, up to 6 hours a week. And we need to ask ourselves, in those containers, in that limited time that we're investing, are we actually pushing ourselves with effort as much as we should? And there is really important reasons why we should be training, quote unquote, hard, subjectively hard. And the terminology I'm going to kind of orient you to is moderate activity, vigorous activity, and whatnot. So we're going to unpack what it means to train hard, why that matters, and the benefits to your overall health and health span that come with training hard. And spoiler alert, you probably are not training hard enough. And we'll get into that. And hopefully you leave this episode with a lot of knowledge that you can apply starting today or even next week to make sure that you're training hard enough to get the benefits that you need. But first, as we always do, we're going to start with your weekly health brief, brought to you by Or Health. This is the 5 health and fitness headlines that you need to know this week. Let's dive in. Your first headline of the week has to do with ultra-processed foods. So a new investigation published this week in the Journal of Public Health Nutrition has uncovered the direct link between, believe it or not, the tobacco industry and the design of ultra-processed foods. Hang in there. Researchers at the University of Bath and the University of Cambridge analyzed internal industry documents and found that during the 1980s, shout out to my 80s babies, as well as the 1990s, after lawsuits and regulations began crippling the tobacco industry, major tobacco companies like Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds bought food companies including Kraft, General Foods, Nabisco, and Post, some of the biggest food brands out there. They then applied the same engineering principles they used to design addictive cigarettes to design addictive foods. Bliss points, flavor compounds, texture engineering, reward pathway optimization. The same scientists, the same labs, the same stupid playbook, just pivoted from nicotine to processed food. This stuff pisses me off. Lead researcher Dr. Anna Gilmore said, quote, "These companies didn't just buy food brands, they reshaped the global food supply using techniques originally designed to maximize cigarette addiction. Today, ultra-processed foods make up nearly 60% of the average American diet. Childhood obesity has tripled since 1980. Type 2 diabetes is showing up in teenagers now. And this study finally connects the dots as to how these bastards got their tentacles into us. So, translation, if you've ever felt like you couldn't stop eating a bag of chips or a sleeve of cookies, that is not you or your willpower. That is the design. That is the intent. It was engineered intentionally to addict you. And now they are caught red-handed, and it's well documented. So glad to hear. Next up, this headline will change how you think about calories. So a new study published in Cell Host and Microbe found that your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your intestines, directly controls how many calories you actually absorb from the food that you eat. In other words, it's different from person to person. So researchers at Arizona State University tracked 30 adults on identical diets for several months while sampling their stool, blood, and energy expenditure. The result, people with certain gut bacteria absorbed up to 150 more calories per day from the same food compared to people with different bacterial profiles over a year. That's a 15-pound weight difference from eating the exact same meals. Interesting stuff. So lead researcher Dr. Karen Swayzea says, quote, two people can eat the same meal and absorb very different amounts of energy depending on their gut microbiome composition. This challenges the idea that a calorie is just a calorie, end quote. The factors that shape your microbiome, you ask? Fiber intake, fermented foods, antibiotics, stress, sleep, and exercise, none of which are quick fixes, but this is key, all of which are within your control. Eat more plants, eat more fermented foods, move daily, sleep well, manage your stress. Your gut bugs will reward you. All right, folks, it's summertime and we got to be thinking about hydration. And here's the thing about the summertime. By the time you feel thirsty, especially if you're active, you are already behind, you're already dehydrated. And sometimes we don't connect the dots. It could be a headache. It could be a 3 p.m. energy crash, brain fog, that cramp on your third mile jog. And most of us are walking around dehydrated and have no clue. And living here in Colorado, especially in this dry air, I feel it fast. And that's why I reach for Purest Nutrition's hydration powder. It's one scoop, 10 ounces of water, quick, ready to go, over 800 milligrams of electrolytes, real sodium from pink Himalayan salt, things like potassium, calcium, magnesium that actually absorb. And here's the key. It's important to me. Zero sugar, guys. No artificial sweeteners. It's NSF Sport certified. You know exactly what's going into it. A lot of the other hydration products on the market have tons of sugar. It's just not good for you. This product is amazing. And parents, don't overlook how important it is to keep your kids hydrated, especially if they're out being active in the sun. My kids love this stuff. I mix it up. My son always asks for, where's the strawberry lemonade? That's Purest Nutrition hydration powder. So you can go to purestnutrition.com. Again, that's purestnutrition.com, or click the link in this episode description to get your Purest Nutrition hydration powder or browse any of their products. Stay hydrated out there this summer. Next up, every once in a while, we like to pick on and pile on alcohol consumption. So I've got a study for you, and this one's important. So a large new study published this week in the journal The Lancet Oncology confirms what previous research has been hinting at for the last several years, and that is there is no safe level of alcohol consumption when it comes to cancer risk. We've got to let this sink in, folks. It's only been in the last couple of years that people are connecting alcohol to cancer, and that's important. So researchers analyzed data from over 5 million adults across 30 different countries. So it's a massive study, folks. And they found that even consumption below one alcoholic drink per day was linked to a measurable higher risk across multiple cancers. Which ones? Breast, colorectal, liver, esophageal, and oral cancers. The numbers: one drink per day was associated with a 4% increased risk of breast cancer in women. 2 drinks per day raised that risk to 13%. The dose-response relationship was linear, meaning the more you drink, the higher at risk you are. And the lowest risk was 0. So lead researcher Dr. Beatrice Lobby-Seckerton of the International Agency for Research on Cancer said, quote, the evidence is now overwhelming. Alcohol is a group 1, that's bad, carcinogen, the same category as tobacco and asbestos. There is no safe threshold. And look, I'm not saying don't drink. I am saying look at this data, guys. Make informed choices. And if you've been telling yourself that one glass of wine a night or one kombucha or beer, whatever, is healthy, it's just not. It's a lie. And that argument does not hold up anymore. Next up, let's talk about AI and specifically teenagers. So a startling new study from Common Sense Media published this week found that 1 in 5, 20% of teenagers in the United States of America are now turning to AI chatbots, things like ChatGPT, Claude, Character AI, and others for mental health advice. And the majority are keeping it secret from their parents. Here's some numbers for you. 22% of teens aged 13 to 17 have used an AI chatbot for emotional support or mental health guidance in the past 6 months. Of those, almost 70% said they have not told their parents. 31% said they prefer talking to AI over a human therapist because, quote, it doesn't judge and it's always available. And I would even say free when you're comparing it to a mental health therapist, but more on that. So the concerning part, AI chatbots are not therapists, obviously. They're not trained clinicians. They cannot recognize yet warning signs of suicidal ideation, abuse, or eating disorders. the way that a trained professional can. And in some cases, they've given absolutely dangerous advice, telling users to do things like discontinuing medications, encouraging unhealthy behaviors, and reinforcing distorted thinking. Study lead Dr. Robbie Tornoy says, quote, "This is happening at scale, in private, and without any oversight. We need parents, schools, and platforms to take this seriously now," end quote. So parents listening, if your teen is struggling, look, maybe they're not. Don't assume that they'll come to you. Open the door, ask the question, ask about AI, monitor their phones if you have to, because AI, while it can be helpful, cannot replace a professional trained medical provider. So be intentional and intervene and find out if your kids are using this stuff and try to help them. And last up for your health brief, this one is a perfect bridge into the main topic today. It's a new study from the University College London published in JAMA Network Open found that adults in middle age, and this is it, who get 1, enough sleep, and 2, engage in enough moderate to vigorous physical activity have significantly better mental health outcomes and longer health span than those who don't do both. Researchers tracked 8,958 United Kingdom adults from age 40 to 69 for over a decade. And here's the findings. Adults who get 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night and engage in at least 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous exercise had a, get this, 40% lower risk of developing depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline compared to adults who failed to meet either standard. And here's the key word, and we're going to unpack this in the main feature today, vigorous. What is vigorous? Not movement, not steps, vigorous activity, the kind of exercise that A, gets your heart rate up, B, makes you breathe hard, and C, genuinely challenges your cardiovascular system. So lead researcher Dr. Michaela Bloomberg said, quote, "The combination of adequate sleep and vigorous exercise appears to be uniquely protective." And this is both mentally and physically. More on that later. Neither of them alone delivers the same benefit. They work synergistically. And that's the perfect setup for today's deep dive, because here's the truth that almost nobody talks about, or maybe no one wants to be honest with. Most of us are not training vigorously enough. We think we are, but we are just not. And it's costing us our health span. So that is it for our weekly health brief for the week. Now let's dive in to the main feature. All right, folks, let's jump into the main topic at hand today. The key question here, are you training hard enough? And what I'm not asking is, are you working out? What I'm not asking is, are you active? Are you getting your daily steps? Are you going to the gym? What I'm asking is a different question, which is, in the containers of your training, are you pushing yourself to a degree that allows you to get the maximal benefit? And by maximal benefit, what I'm not talking about is aesthetics and strength. I'm talking about the big picture, the well-rounded benefit of fitness, which is also, and this is key, your health span, your heart health, things like that. So that's the key question. And let me just give you some statistics and some studies to really double click and double down on why this is important. So first, according to the most recent CDC data, that's the Centers for Disease Control, only 24%, or 1 in 4 American adults meet the current federal physical activity guidelines for both, and this is key on this, both aerobic and strength exercises, okay? And only half meet the aerobic guidelines alone, and 80% of adults are just not getting enough exercise in general, period. But this is the part that should really get your attention and convince you to do something about this whole vigorous exercise thing if you're not already. A study published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine found that of the people who do self-report that they're meeting the guidelines, meaning that they say they're getting the aerobic and strength training guidelines that are put out, only about 1 in 4 are actually doing it or actually getting and meeting those guidelines. So translated, people are drastically overestimating both how much and, key here, how hard they're training. And it's a massive miscalculation. So, you go for your walk, you track your steps, you get your lifting session in, you do your cardio. What these statistics are saying is you're not training as much as you should be, and you're certainly not pushing yourself to the degree that you should be, which is why I'm doing this episode, especially after the study that came out about how vigorous training positively impacts not just health span, but your mental health. Let's start. We'll call this kind of act one here. Let's start with the different types of training. And I already alluded to it, right? There's all different types of training, but let's break them down to two, which is your strength training, lifting weights to build muscle, build lean muscle mass, strengthen your bones, things like that. And then the cardiovascular training. Now, here's the thing. When you're doing strength training, and I'm not talking about strength training with cardio mixed in, things like CrossFit and high rocks and stuff like that. Purely strength training, lift things up, put things down, rest, right? That's what they say. That's the stereotype. Well, the system that you're really taxing when you're doing strength training, there are two. It's your central nervous system and your muscular system. Think about yourself if you've ever lifted a weight, and hopefully you have. When you do a set of, let's just pick one, deadlifts or bench press, run them both out in your mind here as I kind of walk you through this. When you do your deadlift exercise or your bench press exercise, let's just say you had 3 sets. Let's just say your first 2 sets, you don't push yourself, quote unquote, hard. And on your third set, you know what, like I'm really going to, quote, push myself. On that third set, you might get to, let's just say you're working on 10 reps. Your 8th, 9th, and 10 reps, they might be hard to you, but what does hard mean? In that sense, hard would mean I struggled really hard to lift the weight. I barely got it up. Therefore, I worked hard. And that's true. If you're comparing other reps in that set or other reps throughout your workout, it's true, but it wasn't hard on your cardiovascular system. As a matter of fact, if you do as I do and you look at your heart rate during your strength training sessions, most times, if I'm focusing on strength gains and muscle gains, my heart rate barely scratches the surface of zone 1 and zone 2, which are lower heart rate zones. When that set is hard and when you feel like it's hard, it wasn't hard on your heart. It was hard, depending on the move, on your central nervous system, which is a different type of being taxed or fatigued, and your muscular system. You literally might have worked your muscles to failure. And those are great things. Like your body will adapt if you continuously challenge yourself in strength training, and that adaptation will be to grow bigger, stronger, maybe more explosive muscles, right? Or to train your central nervous system to be able to lift more weight. Just a quick aside, what's always has amazed me is you look at some super, super strong power lifters and strength type athletes, they don't look like they have like massive amounts of muscle versus, say, like a heavyweight bodybuilder, but they are stronger. And have you ever asked yourself, why is it that, say, person A can have less lean muscle mass, but lift more weight than person B who has more lean muscle mass? Well, some of that has to do, not all, but some of it has to do with their central nervous system being trained. So all that to say, when you talk about training vigorously or training, quote unquote, hard, strength training is a completely different animal than cardiovascular training. So let's talk about cardiovascular training, on the other hand, which taxes your cardiovascular and metabolic system. So hard here means your heart rate is elevated. You are breathing hard. You can't hold a conversation comfortably. The federal definition of vigorous exercise is anything that gets you to 70 to 85% of your maximal heart rate. And for most adults, if you're wondering, that's roughly 130 to 160 beats per minute. So if you're wondering, this is just a really good fitness hack, if you will. It's a simple test to measure how hard you're working within a cardio session if you're not wearing a wearable to track it. And it's called a talk test. You may have heard of this. So light cardio, minimal effort. If you can carry a conversation with full sentences while you're exercising, you are training in the low intensity zone. If you can speak in short phrases only, but not full sentences, meaning you have to take kind of slight breaks, but you can mostly communicate, that is typically associated with a moderate heart rate. And then lastly, if you can only get a word out or two, if any, while you're training, you're just kind of like struggling and dying just to be able to preserve every breath, that is vigorous. And be honest with yourself when you look at your exercise investment every single week and ask yourself, how often are you truly training vigorously? How often are you truly unable to talk within your workouts? That's the measure of vigorous training. And if your answer is never or not much at all, we're about to go into why it's important that you change that and start to do something about it. So let's talk about why this matters, because the health benefits, the ones the studies actually find, only kick in at certain intensities. So let's talk about why this matters, because there are tremendous health benefits to training, or at least investing a percentage of your training in these vigorous zones. So more studies for you. If I haven't made my point already, I'll try to run through these quickly and not drag you in the weeds. So the UCL study that I mentioned earlier in the episode specifically found that moderate to vigorous exercise protects mental health in middle age, and not gentle exercise, not any movement. It has to be vigorous. So redundant here, mental health benefits, which there are crossover benefits. If you're healthy mentally, it is going to impact your physical health, including your stress, your cortisol levels, your performance in the gym, your ability to show up consistently in the gym. So that's important. Another one, a 2022 study published in JAMA, Internal Medicine, found that, first off, wait, real quick, if you're new to the show, I don't know when I started doing this, but every time I see this JAMA, I can't not do my reggae guy. So bear with me on that. So in this JAMA, Internal Medicine found, back on track here, as little as 15 minutes per week of vigorous exercise was associated with an 18% reduction in all-cause mortality. So in other words, if you got 15 minutes of effort and willpower to invest in this vigorous training, you are going to reduce the chances of dying by 18% over time. And then to make it even better, if you can double that, if you could do 30 minutes of training per week in these vigorous zones, which by the way is exactly what I do, then that drops your mortality risk by 25% over time. And then another one for you in the last one for now, a 2023 study in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that brief, intense bursts of activity, what they called, quote, vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity, were associated with reduced cardiovascular disease and cancer mortality, even in people who weren't formally exercising. In other words, the benefits compound if you just add more and more vigorous training on it. And of course, there's probably a point of diminishing returns, but the data is pretty clear here. Listen, folks, we just covered a story about alcohol. Let's talk about alcohol. Stats show 1 in 10 Americans are on the spectrum for alcohol use disorder, which means a lot of us are drinking too much. I just covered a story that is a carcinogen. Not is it just going to make you hungover, have anxiety, feel ashamed, but it can literally kill you over time, which is why I am so proud to be partnered with Or Health, an amazing company that makes a safe, FDA-approved medication called naltrexone. It's changing lives and it's changed mine. You can take it once daily or even before you drink, and it works, get this, by blocking the reward signal in your brain so that the craving, that pull you feel to drink more, it just goes away. No more white knuckling, no more willpower. It is incredible. And my partner, Or Health, makes it very easy to get started. You take a quick online assessment. It's totally private. A licensed medical provider reviews every case. And if it's right for you, a prescription is delivered directly and discreetly to your door. And that's not all. They also offer coaching and online support catered to you and your goals. So if you want to take back control of your drinking, click the link in the episode description or go to orhealth.com. That's OAR health.com to get started. You've got this. So what happens if you are training, but you are not training vigorously? Let's start with strength training. So we've covered this on the show, but there's something called sarcopenia, which is your body just naturally losing lean muscle mass as you age. So after age 30, you start losing 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade. And by 70, if you've never lifted or lifted very infrequently, you've lost up to 40% of your muscle mass. So strength training itself is a preservation tool to not lose muscle, let alone a tool to gain muscle. So it's very, very important. But the key here is if you are not training and challenge yourself in your strength training, set aside vigorous for a second, but if you're not pushing yourself, you're not going to as effectively fight off sarcopenia, but also you're not going to gain lean muscle mass, which has amazing health benefits across the board. Now, no vigorous cardio has even worse risks. So let's start with VO2 max. And I'm going to hit on this a little bit later, but VO2 max is your body's ability to use oxygen efficiently during exercise. In other words, someone with a higher VO2 max, and it does work that way, the higher is better. Every breath you take, their body is more effective and efficient in pulling that oxygen into your cardiovascular system, into your blood, to be able to use it more efficiently, right? But VO2 max itself, Every study that comes out now about longevity that wants to link it to a KPI, right, a key performance indicator of your health, links VO2 max as the single strongest indicator of longevity. It is the gold standard now for a health metric for your heart. So that's VO2 max. It declines roughly 10% per decade after age 30 unless you intentionally train it or your lifestyle intentionally maintains it or trains it, right? So if you're kind of processing here and connecting the dots with both strength training and cardiovascular training, if you're not intentional as you age, on the strength training side, you will lose muscle, lean muscle mass, which has disastrous effects as you get older. And if you don't train cardio in a very intentional way in these vigorous zones, you're going to lose 10% of your VO2 max over time, which also has implications on your longevity. Okay, so hopefully I've made the case so far as to why training vigorously matters. Let's talk a little bit about how to measure it, or maybe even how to know your own baseline to see where you are today. And then we'll close with what are some protocols to move the needle and improve all of these metrics that are connected to your heart health and longevity. So, how do we know, objectively speaking, if we're training hard enough? Well, we look at the metrics in our heart, right? So let's hit on VO2 max again. Again, this is the maximum amount of oxygen your body can actually use during intense exercise. So you don't have to remember this, but it's measured, in case you're wondering, in milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. If you want to run that back and listen to it again, go ahead, but you don't have to remember that. But essentially, the higher your VO2 max, the better. Elite endurance athletes are in this, this is crazy, 70 to 80 range. And just for context, most kind of like average trained people are probably sitting mid 40s. Well, elite endurance athletes are in the 70 to 80 range. If you're a healthy 40-year-old man, I'm 41, it should be in the 40s. I would say 45-ish would be a good moderate goal. A 60-year-old should still be in that like high 30s, 30 range. So to track your VO2 max, most modern wearables that most of us wear, such as an Apple Watch, Garmin, Whoop, which I have, or a Fitbit, they will give you an estimation of your VO2 max. It's not like a lab grade accuracy, and that's okay because trends matter. So if you have a wearable, open up your app on your smartphone, navigate to whatever you're looking at. It could be Apple Health or Whoop, and in the metrics somewhere, you will find an estimate for your HRV. And again, it's not as accurate as going to, say, a studio that's going to put you on a treadmill with oxygen pumping and read it, but it's still important because to have a baseline, you'll know that if you're changing your training to try to improve those metrics, if that metric moves, it's an accurate indicator that you made an improvement, even if the exact reading is not 100% accurate. Perfect example here of real life. I do have an Apple Watch, but I also have a Whoop. According to Apple Health, my VO2 max is 50. According to Whoop, it's 53. So a discrepancy there. I don't care. It's good to know both of those because as I'm leaning into different types of training, I can see whether or not it's trending in the right direction. So you can use a wearable. Resting heart rate is similarly a very important metric in terms of heart health. Lower resting heart rate is a sign that your cardiovascular system is efficient. Your heart is strong if you have a lower resting heart rate, so it doesn't have to beat enough to be able to just meet the demands of what you're asking your body to do. One caveman simplistic way of thinking about resting heart rate for me is if you have a healthy heart, it's going to kind of push out more heart per pump. It's going to be very efficient. There'll be less pumps. And again, this is Jesse science. If your heart is pumping less and working less hard all the time, that's less tread on the tires of your heart and it will last longer. That's just a simplistic way to think about it. But a low resting heart rate is really, really good. And if you're not wearing a tracker, well, one of the things you could do, it's very simple. When you're laying down in the morning, right when you wake up, just grab your pulse on your wrist, have a timer nearby, count your heartbeats in 15 seconds and multiply it by 4 because that gets you to 60 seconds. It's measured in beats per minute. That's how you can know your resting heart rate. Very simple way to track it. But VO2 max and resting heart rate, in my opinion, are kind of the gold standard indicators of your overall heart health, which is an indicator of your longevity. And there are some other ones, a little more fancy pants, and usually all of these metrics kind of move together. So you can look at one or two. You don't necessarily have to track all of them, but they do mean different things. So I'll hit on this one, heart rate variability. HRV is the short form of it. This is the metric that really put Whoop on the map, if you're familiar with Whoop. But this measures your nervous system's recovery and your zone 2 heart rate efficiency, meaning how fast can you run or bike in a steady state while staying in that zone. So as you get fitter, you'll be able to go faster at the same heart rate. That's an adaptation, but HRV is another one that you might want to look at. So let's move forward. Hopefully I've made my case and given you some metrics to start easing into to have an understanding of your objective cardiovascular health. But let's talk about some protocols, some things that you can do to move the needle in these important metrics. So for cardio, the research is overwhelmingly in favor of high intensity interval training, otherwise known as HIIT. A meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that HIIT improved VO2 max 2 to 3 times more effectively than steady state cardio for the same exact time investment. I mean, that's just amazing. Here's a good way to look at this, and hopefully this sticks with you. But when I think about cardio, and I'm going to give you my own protocols here. When I think about cardio, there's this 80-20 theory that if you're going to take your intentional weekly investment in cardio and break it up into percentages, meaning let's just say for me, it's 2 hours a week that I'm doing intentional cardio. 80% of that investment should be in zone 2 to capture those heart benefits. And the 20% should be in what's called HIIT, more high intensity things, right? Now, just to put my cards on the table, I am not an endurance athlete. I don't enjoy that. I am not someone who focuses on CrossFit or high rocks, but I am someone who is very intentional to invest time in cardio for the reasons I've stated. Now, for me, my VO2 max, as I said earlier, let's go with Whoop because it's higher, frankly, is 53. And my resting heart rate trended over the last 6 months is 45. Those are, objectively speaking, for my age, pretty damn good. That's pretty damn good for a guy that's not out there running endurance marathons or putting excessive amount of times in vigorous training. But I do invest about 20% of my cardio time in those modalities. I'm not going to go into my entire strength training protocol, but here's how I do it. So I've said it before on the show, but my total investment in training, in both strength training and cardio every single week, is about 6 hours. And that includes some light mobility work and some strength training and some cardio. Now, here's how I approach the cardio piece. And I'm not going to go into my entire strength training protocol. I'll hit it high level. But my strength training protocol is this. I lift 4 times a week. I do it Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And my split, as the bros call it, on Monday, it's an upper push day. And I focus on strength reps. So a little heavier weights, a little bit lower reps, but nothing crazy. Tuesday is an upper pull day, as well as core. And I do some hamstring work that day, and that's Tuesday. Thursday is a mixed upper hypertrophy session. So I bring back the upper push and the upper pull. I work them in together to hit those muscle groups a second time that week. I focus more in the higher rep ranges. And then Friday is a lower body strength training day. So that's where I bring it all together. That's your toughest day for my central nervous system. That's squats, leg presses, lunges, Romanian deadlifts, those type of things. And I do core on that day as well. So let's set that aside. But my strength training days are Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Now let's hit the cardio. And this is the point here. This is my protocol to get me to that 53, 54 threshold VO2 max, which is really strong, and to keep my resting heart rate down to 45. Mind you, caveat, your heart health also is impacted by your stress, your sleep, your alcohol consumption, and all those things. So I'm not saying that just by dialing in your cardio, you're going to fix all your heart issues. You got to look at the whole picture. But if we're just talking about cardio, here's exactly what I do. So let's go to that Monday strength training day, right? It's not a taxing day on my central nervous system on that Monday because it's upper body push training. So that for me, after I'm done with that session, I add on a 30-minute cardio session, 20 minutes of which is steady state. And then I just, at the last 10 minutes, I do sprints. I do 20 seconds on, 40 seconds off, 10 times. If I have more time, I might do 30 seconds on, 60 seconds off, 10 times. But if you think about it, in that day, I'm getting strength training, I'm getting zone 2 cardio, and a little bit of HIIT. And again, if you're following the 80-20, that's great. Because if I can get my 15 minutes of high intensity interval training on that Monday, I'm halfway there through the week based on the studies I told you about what 30 minutes of HIIT does a week as it relates to decreasing all-cause mortality, 25%, right? So by Monday, boom, I've got 30 minutes of zone 2. I've got 15 minutes of HIIT, halfway there on the HIIT, and I'm a quarter of the way there on the cardio. All right, let's be honest. You're probably not a professional athlete with a personal chef and unlimited recovery time. If you're like me, you're hitting the gym at 5 a.m. before work or squeezing in training between meetings, just trying to stay consistent while life keeps throwing you curveballs. That's exactly who Purist Nutrition was made for. Purist keeps it simple. NSF certified supplements with minimal, clean ingredients that actually taste good. No artificial ingredients and no proprietary blends where you're guessing what you're taking. Just premium actives like CreaPure, the purest creatine on the planet, whey isolate protein that is US sourced and easy on the stomach, and hydration that keeps you going without all the extra sugar or sodium. Whether you're a parent juggling kids and training, or just someone who refuses to compromise on quality, Purist Nutrition fits your routine. Built for tomorrow, science-backed, tested and trusted by athletes, and most importantly, effective. Visit puristnutrition.com to see the full lineup of quality supplements. That's puristnutrition.com, because your nutrition should work as hard as you do. Tuesday, no cardio. It's a taxing day for me. I do some deadlifts, I do some pull movements, and then I do some core. And then I try to just do like walks throughout the day. I have a weighted vest. I love it. Some people call that rucking. I do that throughout the day. I get my steps in, good to go. Wednesday, full cardio day. I'll do some stretching just because I might be a little stiff from the strength training the day before. But that is a long cardio day for me. And what that looks like, and if you're an endurance athlete, you'll laugh at this because you'll be like, oh, that's long. It's 45 minutes of cardio. And how I structure that, I do 30 minutes of zone 2. And then the final 15 minutes is an interval run. And what is an interval run? Again, it's effort, all out effort, and then a back off. So for that 15 minutes, I'll do 3 minutes of a hard run. If my body's beat up, it could be a bike, it could be something else, a rower. But most times it's a run. So 3 minutes all out on the run, and then it's a 2-minute jog. That's 5 minutes. I do that 3 times. That's 15 minutes. And guys, when I look at my heart rate during those 3-minute sessions, I'm in zone 5, near maximal heart rate, but it's only 15 minutes. It sucks. It's done. But if you think about it, it's Wednesday. That's my other 15 minutes of vigorous training, and that hits 30 minutes for the week, and I'm basically good. And I also got another 30 minutes of zone 2 cardio. So I'm halfway there to my 2-hour goal for the week. Thursday runs around. That's my mixed upper day. Again, not a heavy taxing central nervous system day for me. So I usually feel like I have some time and some juice still left to do some cardio. That'll be an easy zone 2 cardio day. And specifically, I do an incline walk and I'll just hit that, 10% incline, 4 miles per hour, 30 minutes, zone 2, fat loss in the morning. Love it. I'm at 90 minutes of zone 2 for the week. Good to go. Friday rolls around. Again, that's my lower body strength training day. Really taxing from a central nervous system standpoint. I don't feel like doing cardio afterwards. I do some core work. Good to go. Saturday rolls around, and this is the last cardio bout for me. I hop on my bike. My body is usually banged up from that lower body day the day before. I get on my bike. I'll do some stretching, and I'll just do an hour. And some of it's therapeutic. I'll try to put on music. I might even ride in silence. I do an hour ride. I don't try to push myself too much. I'm a little mindful of my heart rate, but any ride that I go on for an hour, I'm getting at least 30 to 40 minutes of zone 2, just by nature of riding the bike. Hills happen. You hit these little difficult points, and that's where I get my other 30 minutes of zone 2. So that puts me at 2 hours of zone 2 for the week and 30 minutes of HIIT. And that's how I do it. And it works great for me. And objectively speaking, again, with the VO2 max that I have, the resting heart rate that I have, all in exercise for the week, 6 hours, not bad. And on the protocol side, I mentioned lifestyle, and I'll close with this on the practical steps. Don't overdo it, guys. Do not overdo it. Hard training requires intentional recovery. So make sure you're getting your sleep minimum 7 hours every single night. Try to track your quality of sleep because that matters too. Eat enough protein, 0.7 to 1 gram pounds per pound of body weight, and just take your recovery days seriously. Do not do HIIT 5 times a week. You will burn out and it will not sustain. Here's the bottom line as we close out the main segment and kind of land this plane, if you will. We've talked about why this matters. We've talked about what it is, vigorous training and moderate training. We talked about the health consequences of not investing in that. And we've talked about some protocols, and I'll circle way back to where I started. Just ask yourself honestly, right? Are you training vigorously enough? You probably aren't. Use some of these protocols because your 70, 80, 90-year-old self, if you're blessed to get there, will thank you for it. Listen, men, if you're like me, you don't give enough thought or care to the men's grooming products that you use. As a matter of fact, you're probably just ordering off of Amazon or grabbing what's ever close, throwing it on your scalp and your skin with no idea whether or not those are quality natural ingredients that you're putting on your body. That's why I'm so glad that I switched to Based Bodyworks. Based makes quality, natural, plant-based men's grooming products. I'm currently using their texture powder. It's amazing. For years, I used this like gel. I'd clump it on there. I'd get that like helmet look. Now it's a powder. I put it on once, takes 30 seconds, configure my hair. It looks natural, doesn't look all caked on. And throughout the day, if I'm taking off a hoodie, changing shirts, whatever, I can just quickly reconfigure it. And I'm amazed at how good it looks, how natural it looks, and how long it lasts. So if you've been using the same products forever without thinking twice about what's actually in them, it is worth a look. So go to basedbodyworks.com. That's basedbodyworks.com. Use code word Stronger Weekly, one word, no spaces, for 20% off. Again, that's basedbodyworks.com. Code word Stronger Weekly for 20% off. And if you order now, you get a free toiletry bag, because confidence shouldn't come at the cost of your health. Well, folks, that's it for the main feature. We're going to close out with 2 segments here. This next one is new. It's your weekly fitness hack that we're going to go out and find like an awesome kind of did you know fitness and training tips, supplement, you name it. And this week, to connect it to the main feature, we're going to talk about the Norwegian 4x4 protocol, which is a perfect segue to this, because this in itself is a form of interval training that can help you with your vigorous training goals as well as your VO2 max. So what is the Norwegian 4x4 protocol? It's one of the most studied and effective protocols in the world, and it's pretty popular. There's some really well-known people out there talking about this. It's developed by exercise scientists at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and it goes like this. Plan for about 35 minutes total, including a proper warm-up. As soon as you feel warmed up, you're going to hit your first interval in this 4x4. So the first interval is 4 minutes. Let's just say you're jogging. And by the way, you can do this jogging, biking, rowing, assault bike, whatever floats your boat. Your first 4 minutes in interval is at 85 to 95% of your max heart rate, which is hard as hell, but sustainable. You want to be able to pick an effort that you can sustain for 4 minutes, guys. It'll be grueling, but it's maximally effective. And then after that 4 minutes, it's a 3-minute recovery, an active recovery, which means an easy pace. Don't walk, don't really come to a stop, but just back off for 3 minutes. So simple, guys. That takes 7 minutes. Do that 4 times. That is your Norwegian 4x4. And here's why I'm letting you know about it and recommending it. The research, Norwegian studies have shown that the 4x4 protocol delivers 70% greater improvements in VO2 max compared to traditional steady state cardio in less than half the time. It's worked. The studies here show it's worked in young athletes, middle-aged athletes, cardiac rehab patients. So it's just amazing. I love that it's flexible. I love that you can do it on all different modalities. I love that it's quick and it's brutal. You do this twice a week, the studies say. Do something like this twice a week, and you're going to see crazy benefits to your VO2 max. So give the Norwegian 4x4 a try. All right, folks, and now for our next and last segment. If you've been following along the last couple of weeks, we just introduced this one. I love it. It's called The Good Stuff, a reason to be encouraged about humanity. There's some amazing people doing amazing things out there, and I plucked this one from the news in the state of Georgia. So amazing stuff here. So out of Atlanta, Georgia, Lori Wood, a 40-year-old nurse at Piedmont Newman Hospital, randomly I've actually been there, met Jonathan Pinkard in 2019 when he was admitted for cardiac issues. Jonathan was 27 years old, autistic, and had spent most of his adult life cycling between homeless shelters and group homes. His mother had died years earlier, and he was left alone and with no family support. So this autistic man shows up to a hospital and he's having cardio issues. So his heart was failing. He needed a transplant. But here's just the unknown cruel part about the U.S. transplant system. To qualify for a heart transplant, you need to demonstrate a stable support system after surgery, someone to take you to appointments, someone to care for you, someone to monitor your recovery, make sure you take your medications. And, I kind of get it. If they're going to, quote unquote, invest in giving you this heart, they want to make sure that you're a person who's lifestyle and circumstances are going to just lead to the best outcome. But Jonathan here did not have any of those things. So without a support system, the transplant board was going to deny him. And without a transplant, he was sure to die. So what happened? Lori, who had been Jonathan's nurse for just weeks, he was a stranger weeks earlier, she watched him face this. She knew the pending decision from the transplant board, and she decided to make a decision that frankly was heroic and inspiring. She legally adopted Jonathan. A 40-year-old nurse adopted a 27-year-old patient she had known for just weeks so he could qualify for the heart transplant that would save his life. Jonathan got the transplant. He survived. He moved in with Lori. She became his legal mother at 27 years old. And in interviews years later, and this is how I found out about it, Jonathan said, quote, "She didn't just save my life. She gave me a new one." Folks, people are still good out there. Don't let social media drag you down. Don't let the news cycle drag you down. If you look for it, you will find some of the most amazing stories in humanity. And I can't shout out Ms. Lori Wood here from Georgia. If somehow this episode finds you, we love you, we're proud of you, and you give us all hope. So that's your good stuff for the week. All right, folks, that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to the end. As I always do, my top 3 takeaways. Number 1, most of us are not training hard enough, and we need to. Only 24% of Americans currently meet the federal exercise guidelines. So get training vigorously, see the benefits, live longer, be happy. You will be so glad you did. Number 2, the 2 most important metrics for your heart health are VO2 max and resting heart rate. Find a way to track them, establish a baseline, switch up your training so you're investing in vigorous training, and hopefully you'll see the needles move in the right direction so you can be healthier and hopefully live longer. And number 3, doubling back down on the fitness hack of the week. Try that Norwegian 4x4 if you'd like. That's 4 minutes of kind of all out, back off for 3 minutes, do it 4 times, and you will be good to go. If you don't like Norwegian, there's plenty of other, you can type in interval run into Google. You can just type in HIIT protocols. You'll find something, but try to get 15 to 30 minutes every week of vigorous training, and you will see a difference. And last but not least, to send you off into the week, let's end with a quote. This one from Earl Nightingale, the late motivational speaker and author, who said, quote, "Don't let the fear of the time it will take to accomplish something stand in the way of you actually doing it. The time will pass anyway." Look, a year from now, what do you want to look like? What do you want your life to be like? What do you want your health to be like? Right? Because that's what we're working here. Yes, it's stronger weekly, but it's stronger monthly, stronger yearly. Don't let the fear or the apprehension of the time invested deter you from doing the things that are going to make the most difference in your life and in your health. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for being here. We hope you had an amazing week. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will see you next time. Be strong, folks.